In the heart of one of the Civil War's most pivotal moments, this narrative takes you deep into the chaos and uncertainty that defined the Battle of Gettysburg. As the sun rose on July 2, 1863, General James Longstreet found himself at a crossroads, grappling with the weight of responsibility and the haunting specter of defeat. With his trusted leader, Robert E. Lee, pushing for an aggressive assault against entrenched Union forces, Longstreet's instincts urged caution. This gripping account unfolds as Longstreet navigates the complexities of command amidst a backdrop of cannon fire and bloodshed. Witness firsthand his internal struggle as he confronts not only the battlefield, but also his own loyalty to a strategy he doubts could lead to victory. Through vivid descriptions and poignant reflections, we explore how decisions made in the heat of battle would shape the fate of armies and alter the course of history. Join us as we delve into Longstreet's perspective, revealing the disarray within Confederate ranks and the stark realities faced by those who fought in this defining clash at Gettysburg. But before we begin, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel to support our community. On May 9, 1863, James Longstreet reached the winter encampment of the Army of Northern Virginia, where he met its leader, Robert E. Lee. The two generals engaged in discussions regarding the recent events of the Battle of Chancellorsville and the wounding of General Jackson, which deeply concerned Lee. The following day, shortly after 3 p.m., Jackson succumbed to his injuries. With the Second Corps commander lost, Lee turned exclusively to Longstreet to strategize for the upcoming campaign. In the aftermath of the war, Longstreet dedicated many pages to recounting his meetings with Lee from May 11th to May 13th. During these discussions, they laid the groundwork for what would be known as the Gettysburg Campaign. Longstreet reiterated his proposal to send 2 divisions from his corps to Tennessee, aiming to merge forces with the Army of Tennessee and Joseph E. Johnston's troops. His plan was to overpower the Army of the Cumberland near Nashville and subsequently invade Kentucky, threatening Cincinnati. Longstreet believed this was essential to prevent Vicksburg's capitulation. When Lee proposed an invasion into Pennsylvania, Longstreet expressed concern that it would take too long and that Vicksburg might fall before they could complete it. He later remarked that it became useless and improper to suggest an alternative strategy. He insisted that their campaign should adopt defensive tactics, compelling the enemy to attack them in advantageous positions within their territory, thus ensuring a potential triumph. Despite his reservations about Lee's strategy, a letter he wrote to Senator Wigfall revealed his confidence in invading Pennsylvania. He stated that if they could cross the Potomac with 150,000 men, they could compel Lincoln to declare his intentions, whether for peace or extermination, and act accordingly. Longstreet recognized the strategic importance of taking the war into Northern territory, indicating that he was not as focused on Western campaigns as his later writings suggested. Meanwhile, Lee traveled to Richmond from May 14th to May 18th to confer with President Davis and his cabinet about the invasion, which they ultimately supported. Before heading north, Lee reorganized the Army of Northern Virginia. He had contemplated this change even prior to Jackson's death. However, with Jackson gone, it seemed an opportune moment. He appointed Richard Ewell as Jackson's replacement and established a new Third Corps under A.P. Hill by reallocating divisions from both the First and Second Corps. Longstreet's reorganized corps would consist of divisions commanded by Lafayette McLaws, John Bell Hood, and George Pickett. While Longstreet approved of Ewell's promotion to corps commander, he held a lower opinion of A.P. Hill, whom he considered inferior to Ewell. Longstreet preferred D.H. Hill for command of the Third Corps instead. Lee had grown disillusioned with McLaws' leadership due to illness affecting his performance at Chancellorsville, and asked Longstreet to assess McLaws' health and willingness for reassignment. McLaws maintained that he was fit for duty and resisted reassignment despite Longstreet's offer to send him southward or swap him with Beauregard's division, coming to assist in Northern Virginia over the summer. Consequently, McLaws remained in place. However, Lee made it clear that any mistakes made by McLaws during the campaign would fall under Longstreet's responsibility. Longstreet acknowledged this understanding and committed to closely overseeing both McLaws and his division. This shift marked the beginning of a rift between Longstreet and McLaws as they prepared for their northern march starting June 3rd. Before embarking on this campaign, Lee expressed his faith in his army's capabilities. The country cannot overestimate its worth. If properly led, they will go anywhere and never fail at the work before them. The march north was swift, yet grueling under the summer sun. Longstreet frequently crossed and recrossed the Shenandoah River to support Stuart's cavalry in safeguarding gaps in the Blue Ridge while screening movements for their army. Observing his troops one day, an officer remarked on Longstreet's apparent fatigue. He replied confidently that he had never experienced tiredness in his life. As they advanced northward together, Lee sought Longstreet's counsel at every stage of their campaign. By June 27th, part of their forces reached Chambersburg, where they established headquarters in a grove known as Shatter's Woods. During this time, British observer Arthur Fremantle from the Coldstream Guards joined Longstreet's staff. Fremantle noted their close relationship. The relations between him and Longstreet are quite touching. They are almost always together. However, some in Longstreet's corps expressed frustration at this constant proximity, feeling it limited their opportunities for detached service compared to Ewell's troops. Fremantle observed that praising Lee was one way to please Longstreet and characterized both generals as unambitious and selfless men. On June 28th, lacking Jeb Stuart's cavalry support, Lee and Longstreet finally received reliable intelligence regarding Union troop movements. Harrison the scout, who had been compensated with gold coins at the beginning of the month by Longstreet, located Longstreet's headquarters and reported that the Union Army was advancing through Maryland and into Pennsylvania. Upon receiving this information, Lee ordered Ewell to return from Carlisle to concentrate their forces. On June 30th, Lee and Longstreet moved eastward toward Cashtown, establishing their headquarters near an abandoned sawmill. Earlier that day, Lee had declared, "Tomorrow, gentlemen, we will not advance to Harrisburg as planned. Instead, we will head to Gettysburg to see what General Meade is up to." On July 1st, the two armies clashed in Gettysburg. As Longstreet, Lee, and Fremantle rode along the Chambersburg Pike, soldiers from Edward Johnson's division of Ewell's corps, unfamiliar with Longstreet, approached him. Some Floridians exclaimed, "Look out for work now, boys, for here's the old bulldog again." As they neared the battle, Longstreet noticed the Federals regrouping on elevated ground beyond the town. He remarked to Lee that they could not have drawn the enemy into a position more favorable for their plans. "All we need to do is maneuver around their left and secure advantageous ground between them and their capital." Lee was not receptive to this suggestion. He struck his fist into his hand and insisted, "If the enemy is there tomorrow, we must attack him." Longstreet countered that if they were there, it would likely be because they wanted them to attack, a valid reason not to proceed. The idea of moving between the Union Army and the capital seemed impractical at that moment, since Lee lacked precise knowledge of the Union Army's location. In reality, many corps were en route to Gettysburg, meaning any movement in that direction could lead to a confrontation with additional Union forces. For now, Lee's order for an attack the following day appeared to be the more prudent choice. Longstreet settled down beside the road where his divisions rested, but likely got little sleep due to his apprehension about the impending engagement. Before dawn on July 2, 1863, after only a few hours of rest, James Longstreet rode to Seminary Ridge to meet Robert E. Lee. Having risen early himself, Lee had breakfast and began making preparations for the day ahead. When they met, Lee informed Longstreet of his intention to maintain an offensive approach. Longstreet objected and proposed they maneuver past the Union left flank and position themselves between Washington and the Union Army. Lee dismissed this idea and called upon Captain Samuel Johnston from his staff to scout the Federal position. Johnston was accompanied by Major John Clark from Longstreet's staff. After their departure, Lee convened with Longstreet, A.P. Hill, Henry Heath, and John Bell Hood, north of the seminary buildings that gave Seminary Ridge its name. 3 hours later, Johnston and Clark returned after scouting southeast toward the Peach Orchard and crossing Emmitsburg Road near two hills known as Big Round Top and Little Round Top. They encountered only 4 Federal cavalrymen during their reconnaissance. Lee eagerly inquired if they had reached those hills. Johnston confirmed they had. After a brief discussion among the 3 generals, Longstreet and Hill walked away, while Lee instructed Johnston to assist Longstreet in any way possible. However, Johnston's information was inaccurate. Union infantry from the 3rd Corps occupied ground north of those hills. Although mist might have obscured Johnston's view, he should have heard nearby troops. Lafayette McLaws then arrived to meet with Lee and Longstreet. While most accounts agree he came after Johnston returned with his report, McLaws contended he arrived beforehand. If true, this would mean that Lee lacked some of the information claimed in Johnston's account, though this was McLaws' recollection. According to McLaws's account, Lee pointed at a map he held and drew a perpendicular line across Emmitsburg Road, while saying, "General, I wish you to place your division across this road without being seen by the enemy if possible. Can you do it?" McLaws replied confidently that nothing would prevent him from doing so and requested permission to reconnoiter the area. Lee informed him that Johnston was already conducting a reconnaissance mission. Thus McLaws sought permission to join him. Longstreet was nearby, listening intently, and interjected firmly that he did not want McLaws leaving his division. He then pointed at the map and drew a parallel line along Emmitsburg Road instead of a perpendicular one, as Lee had done. "I want your division positioned here," he stated. Lee interrupted again. "No, General, I want it placed perpendicular." Once more, McLaws sought permission for reconnaissance, but was denied by Longstreet again before returning to his division for deployment. Lee then rode off to meet General Ewell on the left flank before returning around 11 o'clock back to Seminary Ridge, where he issued orders for McLaws and Hood's divisions to advance. A brigade from Hood's division was delayed in arriving. Thus he requested a pause until it could join them. Lee consented before departing once more. Even some of Longstreet's supporters, like Edward Porter Alexander, noted that he did not approach his duties with the same energy he had exhibited in previous assignments under Lee's command. According to one biographer's assessment, Longstreet may have allowed his disagreements with Lee to affect his performance. What was lacking in Longstreet on this day was the meticulous preparation that had characterized his leadership at 2nd Manassas, Sharpsburg, and Fredericksburg. However, these shortcomings were not solely attributable to him. Like a cumbersome beast, the Confederate Army faltered into battle on July 2nd. McLaws's division led Longstreet's corps with McLaws and Johnston at the forefront, while Longstreet rode ahead of Hood's division. As they neared a hilltop cresting point, both McLaws and Johnston recognized that Little Round Top would be visible from there, alerting any signal stations present about their movements. When troop movement halted momentarily, Longstreet rode over to assess what was happening. After discussing it with McLaws regarding needing a countermarch for an alternate route due to visibility concerns at Little Round Top, Longstreet instructed them accordingly. Johnston suggested avoiding the hill altogether by traversing through a field as artillery had done previously. However, Longstreet preferred sticking with roadways instead. It wasn't until around 3 p.m. when Kershaw's lead brigade came under artillery fire upon reaching their designated field location that McLaws realized Longstreet had misled him regarding enemy positioning, believing there would be no opposing forces directly across from him. While McLaws wanted an immediate attack against Union positions based on this new intelligence, Longstreet insisted they wait until Hood could fully deploy his troops first. Hood dispatched scouts forward who determined he could maneuver around right flank positions effectively against Union forces. Longstreet rejected this request no less than 4 times before riding personally over to Hood, ordering him forward into combat, while returning back himself for observation purposes during assaults taking place thereafter. As described by one Texan observer, Longstreet remained mounted like an iron statue upon his horse, surveying impacts made by cannon fire through use of his spyglass without flinching despite limbs falling around him like rain. The assault commenced around 4 p.m., with Hood's men targeting Devil's Den, the Valley of Death, the wheat field, and both Round Tops, while simultaneously McLaws' troops advanced toward Wheatfield as well as peach orchard areas nearby, behind Barksdale's Mississippians, who charged successfully, followed closely by Wofford's Georgians leading up front alongside Longstreet himself. Upon seeing him approach, the brigade erupted into cheers, prompting Longstreet admonishing them, "Cheer less men, fight more." As they passed prisoners captured earlier by Mississippians, one Federal soldier asked who commanded them. Upon learning it was indeed General Longstreet, the man remarked incredulously, "No wonder we are thrashed upon every field. There isn't another lieutenant general in our entire army willing enough to risk life during such charges." Longstreet remained at the peach orchard, observing the ongoing assaults. It had been since his time at the Piper farm during Antietam that he had been so close to the fighting. One biographer suggested this proximity was due to Longstreet's commitment to take personal responsibility for McLaws' performance. As he watched Hood and more closely McLaws' division, General Pickett approached. He had come from Chambersburg and rode ahead to receive his orders. After witnessing the battle alongside Longstreet, Pickett returned to his division, learning that Lee did not require his presence that day and would call for him when needed. When darkness fell, Longstreet called off the assaults but did not personally report to Lee. Instead, he sent an aide with a summary of the day's events. One biographer noted that Longstreet's decision not to confer with Lee likely stemmed more from his mood than from any necessity for a brief horseback ride. He had watched his divisions fight valiantly only to suffer significant losses in an attack he had opposed. His anger towards Lee's plan was palpable, and after witnessing such sacrifice, his dissatisfaction was likely even greater that night. Lee ordered that the offensive would continue at dawn the following day. Longstreet would later claim he never received the order, and neither he nor Lee informed Pickett of his role in the next day's assault. However, Edward Porter Alexander recounted a different version of events, stating that he went to Longstreet's headquarters, where Longstreet confirmed they would renew the attack at daylight. Regardless, Longstreet went to bed that night, filled with anger over the heavy casualties incurred that day, despite his objections to the plan. At sunrise, Robert E. Lee rode to find Longstreet on the Confederate right. Upon locating him, Longstreet explained, "General, I have had my scouts out all night. I find that you still have an excellent opportunity to move around to the right of Meade's army and maneuver him into attacking us." Lee dismissed this suggestion and pointed toward Cemetery Ridge, declaring his intention to attack that position with 3 divisions from the 1st Corps. Longstreet replied, "General, I've been a soldier all my life. I have been with soldiers engaged in fights by couples, squads, companies, regiments, divisions, and armies. I should know what soldiers can do. In my opinion, no 15,000 men arranged for battle can take that position." They discussed it further, but Longstreet realized Lee was resolute in his decision. Lee then jabbed his fist toward Cemetery Ridge and asserted, "The enemy is there, and I am going to strike him." The 2 generals then rode along the Emmitsburg Road to observe the Federal position. They were soon joined by A.P. Hill and Henry Heath. Longstreet conveyed that Hood's and McLaws' divisions were too severely depleted from the previous day's fighting to participate in a main assault today. Thus it was decided that Pickett's fresh division, along with brigades from Hill's corps, would lead and support the attack. A significant artillery bombardment would precede the infantry assault to weaken the Federal position and neutralize their artillery. Preparations commenced for forming up infantry for their charge on Cemetery Ridge. Pickett's division would be arranged in two lines, 2 brigades in front and 1 behind. The brigades from Hill's corps on Pickett's left were still reeling from their losses on the first day. Longstreet later remarked that sending them into battle on this third day was a grievous error. Nevertheless, Lee assigned Longstreet as commander of the attack over A.P. Hill's troops. Hill noted in his report that he ordered his brigades to report to Longstreet. However, it appeared that Longstreet did not position those troops himself. They seemed left without direction. Hill likely avoided stepping on Longstreet's toes since he had been given command of the attack. All preparations were finalized between 11 a.m. and noon. At 11:45 a.m., Longstreet sent a message to Porter Alexander, commanding his artillery. If our artillery fire does not effectively drive off or greatly demoralize the enemy enough to make our effort certain, I would prefer you not advise General Pickett to make the charge. I shall rely heavily on your judgment regarding this matter and expect you will inform General Pickett when the moment is right. This indicated that Longstreet was attempting to shift responsibility onto Alexander. Concerned by this note, Alexander consulted Brigadier General Ambrose Wright, who was with him when it arrived. Alexander then replied to Longstreet, "General, I will only be able to judge our fire's effect on the enemy based on their return fire, since their infantry is little exposed and smoke will obscure much of the field. If there is any alternative to this attack implied in your note, it should be considered carefully before we open fire, because it will deplete our remaining artillery ammunition for this one effort. If unsuccessful, we will have none left for another attempt. And even if successful, it will come at a bloody cost." At 12:15 p.m., Longstreet responded, "The intention is for infantry advancement if our artillery achieves its desired effect of driving off or otherwise warranting an attack." Alexander informed Pickett about consulting with Longstreet. Upon finding Pickett in good spirits regarding the assault, he wrote back, "When our artillery fire is at its best, I will advise General Pickett to advance." Around 1 p.m., over 150 cannons unleashed their fire upon Union positions at Cemetery Ridge. Amid the chaos of iron and explosions, the Confederate troops anxiously awaited their assault. Brigadier General James Kemper of Pickett's division recalled that during this time, Longstreet rode slowly and alone in front of their entire line. He sat his large horse with a grace and composure that Kemper had never seen before. To him, Longstreet's presence was the grandest moral spectacle of the war. He expected to see him fall at any moment, yet he moved majestically, exuding confidence and self-possession that captivated those around him. As Longstreet approached, Kemper remarked, "General, this is a terrible place." Longstreet asked if his command was suffering. Kemper replied, "Yes, a man is cut to pieces here every second while we are talking. Sometimes a dozen are killed at one shot." Longstreet responded in disbelief. "Is it possible? Can't you find any safer position for your men?" Kemper explained, "No, we are exactly behind the line of this crest, the very safest place about here." Longstreet expressed his distress. "I am greatly distressed at this, but let us hold our ground a while longer. We are hurting the enemy badly and will charge them presently." Meanwhile, Colonel Alexander observed that the Union artillery was not being neutralized as he had hoped and thought he saw several guns being withdrawn. He quickly wrote to Pickett, 18 guns have been driven off. For God's sake, come on quick or we cannot support you. Ammunition is nearly out." The courier carrying this message found Pickett and Longstreet together. Pickett looked grim as he read the note and asked, "General, shall I advance?" Longstreet could only nod in response. Longstreet then rode to Alexander to inquire about the artillery situation. Alexander informed him that his ammunition chests were empty and that he would struggle to support the infantry. Longstreet wanted to delay Pickett's advance until they could replenish their ammunition. However, Alexander explained that it would take over an hour to accomplish this, and that Union forces would only strengthen their position in that time. "I don't want to make this attack," Longstreet stated firmly. "I believe it will fail. I do not see how it can succeed. I would not make it even now, but General Lee has ordered it and expects it." As Pickett's men began their march, Longstreet sat on a rail fence, watching his veteran troops move into what he perceived as certain danger. He sent staff officers to urge support for Pickett's flanks. In the later stages of the assault, British observer Arthur Fremantle found Longstreet and remarked that he wouldn't have missed witnessing the event for anything. Longstreet replied, "The devil you wouldn't. I would have liked to have missed it very much." They had attacked and been repulsed. Soon after, divisions and brigades began retreating back towards Seminary Ridge after suffering defeat. Longstreet and Lee rode along the lines to encourage their men and attempt to boost morale. The two generals conferred and ultimately decided to order a retreat. By mid-July, the Army of Northern Virginia had returned to Virginia. As the dust settled on the battlefield of Gettysburg, the echoes of cannon fire faded, leaving behind a haunting silence. General James Longstreet, burdened by the weight of command and the scars of battle, stood at the precipice of history, grappling with the consequences of decisions made in the heat of conflict. In this moment, he realized that the true cost of war extends far beyond mere numbers. It is etched into the hearts and minds of those who endure its horrors. With his troops retreating and Union forces regrouping, Longstreet's thoughts turned to the future. Would his actions be remembered as a testament to courage or a cautionary tale of miscalculation? As he rode alongside General Lee, both leaders faced an uncertain path ahead, one fraught with challenges that would test their resolve and redefine their legacies. In the aftermath of this fierce encounter, one question loomed large. What lessons would be learned from this day of reckoning? The story does not end here. It is merely a chapter in a larger narrative that continues to unfold. The choices made on this fateful day at Gettysburg resonate through history, prompting reflection on sacrifice, strategy, and the unpredictable nature of war. How will history judge Longstreet's decisions? What might have been different if alternative paths had been taken? The echoes of Gettysburg linger on, inviting contemplation and debate about this defining clash in American history.